Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to reflect on some of my reading for the first half of the year and pinpoint what I have determined to be, in my opinion, the most underhyped books that I've picked up. I do want to note that there is a huge difference between most underhyped versus most underrated. For me, underrated means that you very strongly disagree with a relatively low average rating that you've seen a book have, and that's not what we're talking about here. Some of these are quite highly rated, but more so I wanted to pinpoint books that I genuinely really loved, and I think that they deserve to be talked about more. And additionally, I would say some of these I enjoyed. I maybe didn't absolutely love them, but I enjoyed them. However, because they're underhyped, I feel that there are some of you that would really love these, but you maybe hadn't had the opportunity to hear about them much in the past, and maybe this will be the perfect spark for you to hear about them and check them out yourself. I will have a video of the lowest rated books that I picked up this quarter if you're interested in seeing that. I do want to clarify, I'm not saying those are the most underrated, I'm just noting that those were the lowest rated that I picked up. So if you're interested in that, then be on the lookout. If it's already up by the time this one's up, then I'll have it linked in the description bar. But for today, as noted, we're going to be looking at my 5 most underhyped books that I picked up in the first half of the year. The first one that I want to kick this off with is one where when I talked about it, which has only been once thus far, I said this is probably going to be a book that I talk about quite a bit now because I think more people need to pick it up. It's popular in the circles that it's loved within, but it's not as popular as I think it deserves to be, and that would be Dragon Mage. If you desperately are looking for an epic fantasy story with an amazing emphasis on friendship, as well as just a well-developed friendship, then you have to pick this book up. I don't know that I need to say a whole lot else to convince you, but truly, I can't remember the last time I fell in love. Sorry for cracking my knuckles if that bothers some people. But anyway, I can't remember the last time I fell in love with a duo like this duo. They are so sweet. They are such good friends. They have such great communication between each other. They genuinely care about each other. The way that their bond transforms over the course of the story is beautiful to watch. It's so heartwarming. And additionally, I mean, I did pick up the book Green Teeth this year. It's a new fantasy release, and the friendship in that was great too. But I just loved these two. It's one of those stories where the same way people talk about loving, well, maybe not exactly the same way, but there are some couples in stories that people are like, oh, I love them. And they talk about how much they love them. I feel like that towards this duo where I love them so much, and borderline I love them more together than apart. You know, that's what I mean by it's the same way people talk about couples and stories. And when they were apart from each other in this book, I was constantly like, no, especially because the stakes are really high. So I should tell you a little bit more about this besides just the friendship was great and then fawning over how great the friendship was and never telling you anything else. The setup for this story kind of starts out with I don't want to say generic, but a very familiar small fantasy village, and you have these people that everybody knows each other, and then there's one character that you're first introduced to as this young boy. You know, it's that kind of setup. But the boy is picked on for not necessarily being like a lot of other children. It's very clear as you're reading it that he is neurodivergent, and he is so sweet and so wholesome, but he's very misunderstood by other kids in his village. There is another boy who ends up kind of looking out for him, and maybe doesn't quite understand the way that the main character sort of processes things, but he just figures like, well, that's just you. You're just who you are, and it's different from me, and that's fine. I can maybe try to be clear about what I'm trying to say, since you tend to take things more literally. And anyway, it's just so nice to see them immediately. I immediately started diving into the friendship again, sorry. So these two characters, they're young boys, they become friends, and then somebody comes into their village and starts revealing to them these forbidden tales of lore from their world. And it turns out that there are some people in their world who have magic and other people who are completely immune to magic. And then there are sorcerers, and the way that the sorcerers utilize both of these kinds of people is that they steal the magic from the people that have it, and then they use it. So you kind of create an army of people off of the essence of one individual. And then they also have the individuals who are immune to magic. They kind of recruit them to be bodyguards. And it turns out that both of our main characters represent one of these two roles each. So they get whisked off, and as I stated, they get pulled apart and then brought back together a number of times throughout the story. And also the way that the lore unfolds. I don't want to say too much about the lore, but the way it unfolds, the moral questions that arise throughout the story and the world itself are all fantastic. I also really liked the characters outside of just these two main perspectives. I felt like the way that the characters were done throughout the story was great. It's very, very good. I highly recommend it. I think it's wonderful, and as I stated, I think more people should check it out. Next up, we have Mages of the Wheel. So within last year, I picked up the first in this series, and within this year, I have picked up the second, which is titled Storm and Shield. I definitely liked the first book more in this series, as I felt like the emphasis on the familial aspects and just the general development of the characters was stronger. This is a fantasy romance series, but I do feel like it's quite a perfect combination of fantasy versus romance, and the magic and the world is genuinely really, really fascinating. I also think that it's really, really well done. I did a whole in-depth review for the first book. With the second book, I liked it, as I stated, a little bit less than the first, and the way that the books work within the series is that they build off of what has happened with the previous books, but you do focus on a different couple within each of the installments. And I found that within this second installment, I didn't necessarily like the couple quite as much, and their characters in general, I didn't love them as individuals. I do, however, think that if you are a fan of the kind of stoic bodyguard or soldier type character, and then you also really like the sort of carefree maybe in their presentation, but they actually care very deeply, but they're kind of wily and mischievous character, and so one is very rigid and the other is very fluid, you could say. And these two characters, there's this, tension and attraction between them. If you love that setup between characters, then I 100% think, one, you should read the first book, because I really, really like the first book. But second, I think you will very much look forward to this second installment. I found that the way that it built upon the first book, also, it kind of built upon it a little bit. Like, the first book really had such a cool foundation. It did so much. And that's why I think the first one actually is more appealing to me as somebody who loves fantasy, because I think the fantasy elements were so great. And then the romance also was really well done, but it also was well done because the characters themselves as individuals were well done, and the familial things were well done for both of them. So I thought that the first book just did so many things. It was firing on all cylinders. And the second book, to me, felt more like a romantasy story. So it was good and I liked it, but I felt like we had this whole foundation built and we just kind of like added a little bit. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the additional things that we add onto it and seeing how I feel as we progress through this. And I have a feeling this is going to be a series where as I go through it, I'm going to feel different from one to the next. And I might feel not just different from how I felt about the first one, but from other people. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think the second one is really liked, and that people really like the couple in this one way more. But maybe way more is an exaggeration. I think people like the couple. I think they fit more of the tropes that you see, is perhaps a better way to put it. I liked it, and I think that this series in general is underhyped. If you're a fan of fantasy romance, I absolutely, absolutely recommend this. And if you're somebody who likes the idea of fantasy romance, but you just find that maybe you don't like the stuff that's as popular, you want the things that have a little bit more of the fantasy emphasis, then this might be the series for you. If you're somebody that you're basically like, no, I want that stuff from the first one, like the friendship components, that's my thing, this might not be the series for you. But within its subgenre, I definitely think it is absolutely underhyped. I'm not going to spend an extended period of time on this next one because throughout the course of the first half of the year, I've already talked about this one so much, and that would be To Shape a Dragon's Breath. I just think that this is exceptional in every single way. Everything that it was doing, I think it did so well. I thought the thematic elements were great. The world building was great. The way that it took our own history and it did like an alternate history / fantasy version of those things was exceptional. The characters were likable, but a lot of them were very flawed. You understood where they were coming from. You understood how they were products of their society, but you just could see the ways they could be better. But you also could see how they could fall into becoming a worse version of who they were already. The school setting was great. Everything about this was great. And there are dragons. So, I mean, it was basically the perfect first book in a series. I can't wait to see what the author does next. And I want more people to join me on the hype train for this one. There isn't currently a hype train. I'm trying to make there be one. And thank you so much to those of you who recommended this to me because I loved it so much. And I'm now trying to do what you all did for me, which is just to say like, hey, you should read this, it's good, because I think it's so good, and I want other people to get excited with me in preparation for the sequel. Or maybe what I'm saying is suffer alongside me as we wait for the next installment. After that, we have The Councillor. This one is one of those books that on paper is absolutely everything I could want in a political fantasy story. The execution of it, as far as like the prose, I really, really enjoyed. I thought the writing was very mature, but it was, I don't know how to describe it. It was like it was creative in the way that things were described, but also not necessarily in a sense where everything was too over the top in its metaphors. It was more of like it was direct, but the comparisons that were used from time to time were just like, oh, like I perfectly understand what you're conveying, but also how unique of a way to convey it without being purple. I really liked all of that. I wouldn't say, though, that I fell in love with any of the characters. This in some ways reminded me a little bit of something like The Goblin Emperor, where you have a character who's kind of thrust into a position of power, and they don't necessarily feel equipped for it. But where Maya in The Goblin Emperor is just the most lovable cinnamon roll, this character is a little bit more formidable, and she's very intelligent, she's very cutthroat, as is pretty much everybody surrounding her, and she's kind of caught in the middle of trying to manage all of these different people who also have a fair degree of power. So I really liked so many aspects of this, but because there was no one character that I fell in love with, I think that kept me from being as in love with this as maybe I would have thought based off of my tastes, because it does fit my taste so well. However, I do think it delivers on the political intrigue fantastically, and other people might end up really loving these characters. I want to make clear, in case it's not clear, that I did really, really like this. I just didn't absolutely love it, but I still think that it's underhyped, and I still think that a lot of people, especially if you like political intrigue, will really enjoy all the twists and turns throughout this story. Last for today, we have The 13th Child. I felt like I had to put this on the list because I did a whole video discussion / review where I was talking about how within the niche and the corner of the bookish internet that I'm within, this is not necessarily talked about as much as, say, The Devils by Joe Abercrombie, or A Drop of Corruption, or the sequel to The Will of the Many. It's not as talked about as things like those. However, I do actually think a lot of people would really, really like this one. I think this author does a great job with retellings of fairy tales, especially ones that we're not as familiar with. In this one, you are seeing a character who has Father Death basically become her godfather, and they are raising her to be a healer, but in some ways she also has to potentially engage in trying to quote-unquote peacefully end people's lives, and there is a magical component to how she determines whether she saves somebody or leads somebody to Father Death. And I thought that the moral conundrums that presented themselves, genuinely, I felt really a lot for her. I really liked her as a main character. I liked the progression of some of the relationships that we explore within this. And as far as fairy tale retellings go, this one navigated it in a really exceptional way, because fairy tale retellings oftentimes are more contained than, say, a Dragon Mage type of book is. And for a contained story, I found myself invested throughout, even though the players on the board, there aren't that many of them, and the general setting is relatively small and more intimate. I always was looking forward to what was going to happen next, and I honestly couldn't put this book down. I really, really enjoyed it. So if you're like me and you find yourself accidentally within certain corners of the bookish internet, and this is not one that you were hearing about all that often, I do think there's a pretty good chance that a lot of people are going to really, really enjoy this. Let me know for yourself what has been the most underhyped thing that you have picked up. I would absolutely love to know. It doesn't have to be fantasy. I know that everything I talked about here was fantasy, but you're welcome to mention things from other genres. I'm always excited to try different things out. So if there is something that's a thriller or a horror story, or if there's something that's nonfiction, whatever it is, feel free to list it. I would love to know. And of course, feel free to list the fantasy that you find are underhyped as well. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.